This is Old Fort Park. It's located in New Smyrna Beach, Florida. The origins of its construction are obscured in history, but we're going to do our best to investigate and see what we can find out about this fort.
This immense structure at Old Fort Park measures 40 by 80 feet, is constructed of coquina, and contains walls that are up to 3 and 4 feet thick. As of now, historians credit its construction to Scottish physician Dr. Andrew Turnbull, who colonized New Smyrna for Great Britain in 1768. Turnbull had served as British consul to the Ottoman Empire and had married the daughter of a Greek merchant at Smyrna in Greece, hence the colony's name, New Smyrna. Partnered with Sir William Duncan of Great Britain, Dr. Andrew Turnbull secured a massive land grant of up to 40,000 acres from the British Crown, and in 1765 gained official approval from James Grant, governor of East Florida, to settle the area south of the Mosquito Inlet. Turnbull was given the land grant on the condition that he populate the region and cultivate the land. Hence, in 1768, Turnbull arrived in Florida with 1,400 Greeks, Corsicans, Italians, and Minorcans in hopes of establishing a new colony to grow indigo, sugarcane, and other crops. He had hoped that the Mediterranean ethnicities of the colonists would help them adapt to the harsh Florida climate. Let us examine the feasibility of Turnbull's colonists having built this structure. When settling the colony, the Turnbull colonists built permanent houses and support structures of stone and wood, storehouses, a warehouse, a church, agricultural, indigo processing buildings, and an extensive drainage system featuring 3 major drainage and transportation canals and wharves along the waterways. Archaeologists have excavated the remains of a colonial house in New Smyrna. The home had a central chimney with 2 fireplaces and hearths, one for each of 2 rooms separated by a wall. The chimney, fireplaces, and hearths were built of coquina, a naturally occurring rock that was obtained from nearby quarries. The floor was mortar mixed with sand and shell. The presence of coquina as a building material gives some credibility that the New Smyrna colonists could have built the structure in Old Fort Park. However, was there a need to employ such enormous time, labor, and resources to build such a strong structure? Dr. Turnbull's colonists suffered from severe physical abuse, rampant disease, and starvation. The settlers worked 7 days a week in the hot Florida wilderness, received floggings from their overseers, suffered from malaria, scurvy, yellow fever, and received meager rations on account of crop failures due to droughts. These conditions contributed to a general feeling of discontentment and may have made it a challenge for them to build such a massive structure. According to documents, the Turnbull colonists had begun constructing a large plantation house for Turnbull's partner, Sir William Duncan, but had not completed it before the colony failed. A letter written in 1772 by Turnbull indicates his intention to build Duncan a house, and a second letter written in 1776 documents improvements to the settlement, especially a very large stone building. We can't say with any certainty that the very large stone building written of by Dr. Turnbull relates in any way to the current structure, or if the structure was even known by the Turnbull colonists. Nevertheless, Turnbull's relationship with his laborers deteriorated. Perhaps the heavy labor required to build the coquina structure was a major cause for their discontent. The records do not say. However, in 1777, the New Smyrna laborers marched northward to St. Augustine to complain to Governor Patrick Tonin, and the New Smyrna colony was abandoned. This plaque on the east face of the fort commemorates the founding of the New Smyrna colony by Dr. Andrew Turnbull and his colonists in 1768. Another theory, put forth by local historian Gary Luther, asserts that the structure dates back to the first Spanish period. In his book, History of New Smyrna, East Florida, Luther writes about the striking similarities between the Turnbull ruins and the Castillo de San Marcos in St. Augustine. So what are the arguments favoring that the Spanish built this structure as a fortification at New Smyrna? For one, the use of coquina as a building material is similar to that used at St. Augustine's Castillo de San Marcos, as well as Fort Matanzas, located further north at the strategic Matanzas Inlet. Coquina is a very effective building material for forts, as it absorbs cannonballs rather than fractures by the impact of a cannonball. Secondly, the thick walls with buttresses on the thick exterior gives the structure a fort-like look, suggesting a defensive purpose for the structure. Additionally, the fort is located close to the river's edge, where it could easily spot and fire upon any enemy craft. However, there are no records documenting that Spain built such a massive fortification in the vicinity just south of the Mosquito Inlet. Spain had built smaller guardhouses at the Mosquito Inlet to the north, but no structure of this magnitude. Some historians have argued that the massive deep footers and thick coquina shell blocks were required to stabilize a heavy structure directly on top of an unstable, pre-existing Timucuan shell midden, giving credence to the prevailing view that the Turnbull colonists erected the structure, either as a giant warehouse or as Sir William Duncan's mansion. Furthermore, the Workers' Progress Administration, or WPA, restored the coquina walls during the 1930s and may have added features to make the exposed facade resemble a fort. Another possibility as to the origins of the structure is that it is indeed a fortification built by Spain during the first Spanish period in Florida, but the records of its construction have either been lost or destroyed. At this point, no one knows with any certainty who built this structure or when. We'll examine the history of this location following the exodus of the Turnbull colonists in 1777, which takes us to the plantation of Andrew Hull. Spain regained control of Florida from Great Britain after the American Revolutionary War in 1783. In 1801, Ambrose Hull of Connecticut petitioned Spain and was granted rights to start another settlement at New Smyrna, which he called Mount Olive. Hull's goal was to cultivate sugar and cotton. Hull hired stonemasons to construct his plantation house atop an existing foundation. Hull had no need to construct such a massive structure, so it's likely Hull was either aware of the building or built his home atop the prominent mound. During the Patriots' War in 1812, Americans from Georgia sought to wrest Florida away from Spain, making raids on the east coast of Florida. During one of the Patriots' raids, Hull's home was attacked and burned to the ground, and soon after, Hull abandoned his plantation. The next episode in the history of this site was the plantation of Thomas Stamps. Florida became a United States territory in 1823, and in 1830, a frame structure was constructed atop the mound in Old Fort Park to serve as the home of the overseer of a 100-acre sugar plantation created by Thomas Stamps of New York. However, the plantation existed for only 5 years, for on Christmas Eve in 1835, during the outbreak of the Second Seminole War, Seminole warriors launched an attack on the plantations in eastern Florida, destroying Stamps' plantation settlement, including his overseer's residence. This brings us to John Dwight Sheldon's hotel. John Sheldon moved to Florida with his brothers and settled in New Smyrna in 1835, managing the large nearby Kruger and DePeyster sugar plantation. When the Seminoles destroyed the sugar plantations in the New Smyrna vicinity in 1835, Sheldon fled, enlisted as a scout in the U.S. Army, and fought at the Battle of Dunlawton in January 1836. After the end of the Second Seminole War, John Sheldon returned to New Smyrna and was appointed as the local customs collector. Sheldon purchased the old fort property and built New Smyrna's first hotel, the Sheldon Hotel, in 1858 to 1859 atop the historic coquina foundations at Old Fort Park, making it the only hotel south of St. Augustine. On July 26 to 28, 1863, during the Civil War, a Union Navy flotilla under the command of Lieutenant Commander Earl English arrived at New Smyrna, consisting of the screw-propelled steam gunboat USS Sagamore, the mortar schooner Para, the schooner Beauregard, and the steamer Oleander. Under English's command, the flotilla proceeded to shell the town, targeting and destroying the Sheldon Hotel for the purpose of disrupting Confederate blockade-running vessels that operated through the port and destroying cotton stores used to support the Confederate war effort. A pair of monuments commemorates the Sheldon Hotel and its destruction during the Civil War, one on the south side of the fort and the other on the east front of the fort. The Sheldon family thereafter moved to the Bahamas. John Sheldon died of yellow fever, either before the bombardment or soon afterward. After the Civil War in 1867, Sheldon's widow, Jane Murray, returned to New Smyrna and had a smaller structure built atop the ruins, which served as a general store, port collector's office, boarding house, and print shop. Mrs. Sheldon's store fell into disrepair and was torn down in 1896, revealing the coquina foundations beneath. The structure has been protected as Old Fort Park since the 1930s, but the mystery as to the origin of its construction continues. Old Fort Park also contains the remnants of what was formerly an enormous shell midden, as much of the shells were removed for road fill in the early decades of the 20th century. Excavations have revealed deep deposits of oyster shells and fish bones, as well as pottery shards, which date the mound to AD 500 to the late St. John's period of 1500. A portion of the shell mound still exists and is visible on the slopes leading up to the west and south sides of the ruins. If you enjoyed this visit to Old Fort Park in New Smyrna Beach, Florida, please click like, subscribe to our channel, and we will see you on our next adventure.